Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Facts channel. I'm so glad you found your way here. Maybe you had a long day, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep to ocean mysteries rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your body grow light as water surrounding a coral reef. Because tonight, we're exploring the Coral Triangle, the most biodiverse marine region on Earth, where warm currents meet ancient reefs. We'll drift from shallow lagoons where sunlight dances through clear water to deeper channels where creatures glow in the darkness, discovering why this corner of the ocean holds more life than anywhere else beneath the waves. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you, or at least spark curiosity as you drift off. Before we begin, if this helps you unwind, consider liking and subscribing, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, let's begin. The Coral Triangle spreads across 6 million square kilometers of tropical ocean in Southeast Asia, touching the shores of 6 nations: Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, and the Solomon Islands. This vast expanse of warm water contains more marine species than any other ocean region, a concentration of life so dense that scientists call it the Amazon of the seas. The waters here hold more than 600 species of reef-building corals, which is 3/4 of all coral species known to science. These reefs have grown for thousands of years, building structures so massive they can be seen from space, yet constructed by creatures smaller than your fingernail. The triangle's name comes from its rough triangular shape on maps, but the geometry matters less than what it contains: an explosion of evolutionary creativity that has no equal in the world's oceans. This leads to something even more remarkable about the sheer diversity contained within these waters. More than 3,000 species of fish live among the Coral Triangle's reefs, darting through coral branches, hiding in crevices, drifting in schools that move like liquid silver through blue water. 6 species of sea turtle nest on the beaches and feed in the seagrass meadows, ancient reptiles that have changed little in millions of years. The region provides critical habitat for whale sharks, manta rays, dolphins, and whales that migrate through these nutrient-rich waters. Even the smallest creatures contribute to the overwhelming abundance: tiny crustaceans, mollusks by the thousands, worms that filter water, sponges that process nutrients. Every cubic meter of reef water contains more life than you could catalog in a lifetime. Each organism connected to others through invisible webs of relationship and dependence. While the diversity astounds, the reasons for such abundance reveal even deeper mysteries. The Coral Triangle sits at the intersection of 2 oceans, the Pacific and Indian, where currents meet and mix, bringing nutrients from deep water up to sunlit shallows. The region escaped the worst effects of past ice ages, serving as a refuge where species survived when other reefs died, then spread outward when conditions improved. Millions of years of relative stability allowed evolution to experiment, creating new species faster than extinction, removed old ones, biodiversity, accumulating like interest in a biological savings account. The water temperature stays warm year-round, between 26 and 30 degrees Celsius, perfect for coral growth and the countless species that depend on coral. Islands and underwater seamounts create countless microhabitats, each slightly different from its neighbors, allowing specialists to evolve and thrive without competing directly with one another. Beyond this, there's another dimension to understanding coral itself: the foundation on which this entire ecosystem rests. Corals are animals, not plants, though they often look like flowers or stone formations or branching trees. Each coral polyp is a tiny creature, related to jellyfish and anemones, with a ring of tentacles surrounding a mouth that leads to a simple digestive cavity. The polyp builds a skeleton of calcium carbonate beneath itself, extracting minerals from seawater, constructing a protective cup in which it lives. When millions of polyps do this over hundreds or thousands of years, they create the massive structures we call reefs, limestone monuments to patience and persistent growth. Touch a coral, and you're touching both living animal and the stone legacy of its ancestors, present and past, united in a single structure. This leads them into a remarkable partnership that makes tropical reefs possible. Living inside each coral polyp are microscopic algae called zooxanthellae, golden brown cells that photosynthesize like plants, converting sunlight into sugar. The coral provides protection and access to nutrients, while the algae share the food they produce through photosynthesis, feeding their host. This relationship allows corals to grow much faster than they could alone, building reefs in tropical waters that are actually quite poor in dissolved nutrients. The algae also give corals their colors: browns, greens, sometimes golden yellows, the hues of the billions of tiny photosynthetic partners living inside coral tissue. When corals become stressed by temperature or pollution, they expel their algae and turn white, a process called bleaching that can lead to coral death if conditions don't improve quickly. The partnership between coral and algae is so ancient and so essential that neither partner thrives without the other. Not all corals share the same growth form or strategy. Some corals grow in massive rounded formations called brain corals for the meandering patterns on their surface, shapes that can survive heavy wave action and grow for centuries. Others branch like underwater trees, staghorn and elkhorn corals that grow quickly but break easily, pioneering species that colonize new areas. Table corals spread flat and wide, maximizing the surface area exposed to sunlight for their photosynthetic partners. Soft corals lack the hard calcium carbonate skeleton, instead supporting themselves with tiny spiky structures called spicules, their bodies flexible and yielding, swaying with currents like gardens in the wind. Each growth form represents a different solution to the challenge of surviving in the reef environment. Different strategies for gathering light, for resisting waves, for competing with neighbors. Beyond this, there's another layer to reef complexity in how corals create three-dimensional structure. A healthy reef rises from the seafloor in tiers and terraces, creating endless variations in depth, light, current, and shelter. This physical architecture creates thousands of microhabitats, each supporting different communities of organisms. Small fish hide in coral branches, seeking protection from larger predators. Lobsters shelter in caves where coral formations meet rocky bottom. Eels coil in crevices, emerging only to hunt. Tiny creatures graze on algae growing on dead coral surfaces. The reef structure itself becomes as important as the living coral, providing the scaffolding on which entire communities assemble. A coral reef is like an underwater city. The coral buildings creating neighborhoods where different species make their homes, each finding their particular niche in the complex three-dimensional maze. While corals build the reef's foundation, countless other organisms contribute to its daily functioning. Parrotfish graze on algae growing on coral surfaces, their fused teeth forming a beak strong enough to bite through coral skeleton, scraping and crunching, preventing algae from overgrowing and smothering living coral. The parrotfish digest some of what they eat, but much of the coral skeleton passes through and emerges as fine sand, each fish producing hundreds of pounds of sand per year. The white sand beaches surrounding tropical islands are largely parrotfish excrement, coral skeleton, ground fine, and deposited by these tireless grazers. Sea urchins also graze on algae, their five-part mouths called Aristotle's lanterns, scraping surfaces clean. Together, these herbivores keep the reef in balance, preventing the algae that corals farm from being overwhelmed by the free-living algae that would otherwise take over. This leads to something even more remarkable about the relationships between reef species. Many fish on coral reefs form cleaning symbioses, where small, cleaner fish set up stations where larger fish come to have parasites removed. The larger fish, even predators with powerful jaws, remain still while tiny cleaners swim right into their mouths, picking off parasites and dead tissue, performing a service that keeps their clients healthy. Cleaner wrasses and cleaner gobies are the most common cleaners, their distinctive colors advertising their profession, allowing clients to find them easily. Some fish wait in line at popular cleaning stations, queuing patiently for their turn, an orderly process in what could be chaos. These relationships benefit both partners. Cleaners gain food, clients gain health, but they also require trust. The temporary suspension of predator-prey relationships, a truce enforced by mutual benefit rather than law. Not all reef relationships involve such direct cooperation. Competition for space on the reef can be intense, with corals fighting slow-motion battles for territory. When two coral colonies grow close together, they may extend special tentacles loaded with stinging cells, attacking their neighbor's tissue, trying to kill back the competition. Some corals produce digestive filaments that extend from their mouths and digest neighboring coral tissue externally. Others simply grow over their competitors, shading them, blocking access to light, slowly suffocating them beneath new growth. These conflicts unfold over weeks and months, barely perceptible on human timescales, but fierce in their way. Struggles for survival and space, playing out in slow motion. The scars of these battles mark the reef, zones where one coral species has killed back another. Boundaries constantly being negotiated and renegotiated through chemical warfare and aggressive overgrowth. Beyond this, there's another fascinating dimension to coral reproduction and how reefs regenerate. Most corals reproduce sexually once a year, in spectacular mass spawning events, timed to moon phases and water temperature. On certain nights, usually in spring or summer, corals release eggs and sperm simultaneously, clouds of gametes rising from the reef like underwater snowfall in reverse, drifting up toward the surface. The timing must be precise. All corals of the same species spawning together to ensure eggs and sperm meet in the vast ocean. Fertilized eggs develop into tiny larvae that drift with currents for days or weeks before settling onto hard surfaces to begin new colonies. This broadcast spawning produces millions of larvae, though only a tiny fraction survive to establish new corals. The ocean, a harsh filter that allows only the luckiest or best adapted to continue. The synchronized spawning also provides a feast for reef predators, fish, and invertebrates gorging on this temporary abundance. Nature's timing, ensuring that predators cannot eat all the eggs no matter how hungry. While corals reproduce through these spectacular events, they also grow asexually through fragmentation. When storms break coral branches, some fragments can reattach and continue growing, cloning the parent colony. This allows corals to spread without waiting for the annual spawning, and it means that many coral colonies on a reef are actually genetic clones, the same individual repeated dozens or hundreds of times. Scientists use this principle in coral restoration, breaking healthy corals into fragments and attaching them to damaged reefs, jump-starting recovery through these clones. The fragments grow quickly if conditions are favorable, branches extending, eventually meeting and fusing with other fragments from the same parent, reconstructing the structure that was lost. This asexual reproduction supplements sexual reproduction, giving corals two pathways to persistence, two ways to ensure their genes continue into the future. This leads them into the daily rhythm of the reef, which shifts dramatically between day and night. In daylight, the reef bustles with activity, herbivorous fish grazing, predators patrolling, cleaners working at their stations, colors bright under the sun that filters down through clear water. As sunset approaches and light fades, day shift creatures find shelter, tucking into crevices, hiding under ledges, preparing for night. As darkness falls, night shift emerges. Octopuses unfold from hiding places, crabs venture out, nocturnal fish begin hunting, and many corals extend their polyps fully, tentacles waving in the current, catching zooplankton that rise from deeper water under cover of darkness. The reef at night is a different world than the reef by day. Different species active, different behaviors, different dangers and opportunities. Swimming over a reef at night with a light, you see creatures you'd never encounter in daylight. The hidden diversity revealing itself only when the sun releases its claim on the shallow waters. Not all creatures follow the simple day-night pattern. Some fish are crepuscular, most active during twilight transitions, When light levels change rapidly, and the shift change between day and night, communities creates confusion and opportunity. Sharks often hunt during these twilight periods, taking advantage of the chaos when prey species are moving between day and night refuges. Other creatures maintain their own schedules unrelated to light. Some corals feed during the day, others at night, others continuously. Tides also influence behavior, current strength and direction, changing with the moon's pull, bringing nutrients and plankton, occasionally exposing shallow reef areas during extreme low tides. The reef operates on multiple overlapping cycles: daily light and dark, monthly tidal variations, seasonal temperature changes, and the multi-year cycles of weather patterns, each cycle influencing which species thrive at any given moment. Beyond this, there's another remarkable feature in how sound travels on the reef. Underwater, the reef is far from silent. Parrotfish, scraping on coral, create constant grinding sounds. Snapping shrimp produce clicks so loud they can temporarily stun small prey. The collective snapping of thousands of shrimp creating a crackling background noise. Fish make grunting, croaking, chirping sounds, communicating with mates or warning off competitors. The reef's soundscape is complex and information-rich, carrying messages about who is where and doing what. Some fish larvae, drifting in open ocean, can hear reef sounds from distances measured in kilometers, using sound to navigate back towards suitable settlement habitat. The reef calls to its future inhabitants, a sonic beacon in the vast dark ocean, guiding larvae home. At night, the soundscape changes as different creatures become active, a shift you could detect, blindfolded. The reef soundtrack, revealing what you cannot see in the darkness. This leads to the question of how nutrients cycle through the reef ecosystem, transforming sunlight and dissolved minerals into the abundance of life we observe. Coral reefs thrive in what oceanographers call blue deserts, tropical waters so clear because they contain very few dissolved nutrients, most biological productivity locked up in living organisms rather than floating free in the water. The reef recycles nutrients with remarkable efficiency, waste from one organism becoming food for another almost immediately. Dead organisms are consumed by scavengers within hours, their nutrients redistributed to new life. The physical structure of the reef slows water movement, giving organisms more time to extract dissolved nutrients before water flows away. This closed-loop efficiency allows reefs to maintain huge biomass in nutrient-poor conditions, concentrating life through careful retention and recycling of every molecule of nitrogen and phosphorus. While nutrients cycle through reef organisms, energy flows through the system primarily from the sunday, photosynthetic organisms, the zooxanthellae in corals, free-living algae on reef surfaces. Seagrasses in adjacent meadows capture solar energy and convert it to biological molecules. Herbivores eat the photosynthetic organisms, absorbing that captured energy. Predators eat the herbivores, transferring energy up another level. At each transfer, much energy is lost as heat, the price of life and movement. This energy flow supports the pyramid of biomass typical of ecosystems, with many photosynthesizers supporting fewer herbivores, supporting even fewer predators. Top predators like sharks and groupers are relatively rare on healthy reefs, not because of random chance, but because the mathematics of energy flow allow only so much biomass at the apex of the food web. Understanding this flow helps explain reef structure and why disrupting any level cascades through the entire system. Not all energy enters through photosynthesis. Coral reefs also capture energy from the open ocean through filter feeding. Corals themselves catch zooplankton with their tentacles, supplementing what their algal partners provide through photosynthesis. Countless other organisms filter water sponges, tunicates, clams, barnacles, feather duster worms straining out microscopic food particles, capturing nutrients that would otherwise flow past the reef. Some of this filtered food consists of plankton produced offshore that drifts over the reef and gets captured, a subsidy from the open ocean. that increases the reef's productivity beyond what local photosynthesis could support alone. This dual strategy, growing your own food through photosynthesis and capturing food flowing by from elsewhere, helps explain how reefs maintain such high productivity in such nutrient-poor waters. Beyond this, there's another layer to reef ecology, involving seagrass meadows and mangrove forests that often border coral reefs. These three habitats, reef, seagrass, and mangrove, function as a connected system, each supporting the others. Mangrove forests protect coastlines from erosion and storms, their roots trapping sediment that might otherwise smother reefs. The roots also provide nursery habitat for juvenile fish that later move to reefs as adults. Seagrass meadows, growing in shallow, sandy areas, also serve as nurseries and feeding grounds, supporting species that connect to reef food webs. Nutrients cycle between these habitats, carried by tides and currents, and the migrations of fish and turtles. Protecting one habitat while ignoring the others provides incomplete protection, missing the connections that make the whole system function. The most effective marine conservation recognizes these linkages, preserving not just reefs but the mangroves and seagrasses that support them. This leads them into the remarkable diversity of fish shapes and sizes living on coral triangle reefs. Some fish are flat and round like dinner plates, shaped to slip between coral branches. Others are long and thin like pencils, built to hide in crevices. Some are massive and bulky, needing no shelter because size itself provides protection. Tiny gobies measure less than a centimeter, perhaps the smallest vertebrates on Earth, living complete lives among coral branches in territories measured in centimeters. Whale sharks pass through seasonally, the largest fish in the ocean, filter feeding on plankton, big enough that dozens of smaller fish sometimes hitch rides on their massive bodies. This size range, from gobies smaller than your fingernail to whale sharks longer than a bus, represents adaptive radiation, evolution, discovering countless ways to make a living in the reef environment. Not all fish diversity involves size. Color patterns range from brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows to subtle browns and grays that blend with coral and rock. Some fish can change color rapidly, expressing emotion or camouflaging themselves, or flashing warning patterns. Body shapes vary enormously, some compressed side to side, others flattened top to bottom, some round like pufferfish, others streamlined like barracuda. Fin arrangements differ, some fish propelling themselves primarily with tail fins, others using pectoral fins that flap like wings, some hovering almost motionless, using rapid fin movements too fast to see clearly. Each variation represents an answer to specific challenges, a particular way of moving through water, finding food, avoiding predators, attracting mates. The diversity of solutions mirrors the diversity of ecological opportunities the reef provides. Beyond this, there's another fascinating aspect of how many reef fish live their entire lives in remarkably small territories. Some damselfish defend territories just a few square meters, chasing away intruders many times their size, fierce little gardeners protecting their algae farms from herbivores that would graze them bare. Clownfish families live their entire lives within a single anemone, never venturing more than a few meters away, a complete society existing in a space smaller than your dining table. These tiny territories can support a fish for years or even decades, provided the territory contains everything needed: food, shelter, spawning sites. This site fidelity means that many reef fish know their home territory with incredible intimacy. Every hole, every coral head, every stone, a mental map built through years of daily experience, navigating their miniature world with confidence born of absolute familiarity. While some species stay put, others roam widely across the reef or between reefs. Jacks and trevallies cruise the reef edge, hunting in the open water above the coral. Turtles forage across vast areas, swimming between distant reefs and feeding grounds. Many fish undertake spawning migrations, leaving territories to gather at specific locations where they release eggs and sperm before returning home. Groupers aggregate at certain seamounts and reef edges, hundreds or thousands of fish gathering from across the region for brief spawning events before dispersing again. These migrations connect different parts of the reef system, moving nutrients and genes, preventing isolated populations from becoming too genetically distinct. The reef functions as a network, with residents and transients, homebodies and travelers, all playing roles in the larger community's functioning. This leads to something even more remarkable about how many reef organisms use chemical signals to communicate and defend themselves. Corals release chemical compounds that can damage neighboring corals or deter predators. Many sponges produce toxins that make them unpalatable, chemical defenses, allowing them to grow exposed without being eaten. Some fish release alarm substances when injured, warning nearby relatives of danger. Octopuses taste with their skin, detecting chemicals that tell them about nearby food or threats. The reef environment is saturated with chemical information, molecules carrying messages, warnings, attractions, invisible to us, but crucial to the organisms that live there. This chemical dimension of reef ecology remains poorly understood, a frontier of science where new discoveries regularly surprise researchers. Not all chemical interactions involve communication. Some involve true biochemical warfare, organisms poisoning their competitors or prey. Cone snails hunt with harpoon-like teeth that inject venom complex enough to kill fish almost instantly. Some species of cone snail produce venoms dangerous to humans, though encounters are rare and usually result from people handling the beautiful shells. Blue-ringed octopuses, found in some parts of the coral triangle, carry venom containing tetrodotoxin, the same poison found in pufferfish, potent enough to kill much larger animals, though the octopus itself is smaller than your hand. These chemical defenses evolve through arms races, prey developing resistance, predators developing more potent toxins, a cycle that has produced some of the most complex venoms known to science. Beyond this, there's another dimension to reef life in the creatures that don't look like animals at all. Sponges grow on reef surfaces, seemingly simple organisms, but actually remarkably complex animals that pump hundreds of liters of water through their bodies daily, filtering out bacteria and microscopic particles too small for other filter feeders to catch. Inside a sponge's body, specialized cells perform different functions, some creating water currents, others capturing food, others producing the spiky silica or calcium structures that support the sponge's body. Sponges can be bright red, orange, yellow, purple, green, their colors coming from compounds that may protect them from excessive sunlight or from predators. Some sponges are toxic, others harbor photosynthetic bacteria similar to coral zooxanthellae. Still others host communities of small crustaceans living inside their water channels. A single large sponge can be an ecosystem unto itself, providing habitat for dozens of species. This leads them into the mysterious lives of octopuses and their relatives living on coral triangle reefs. Octopuses are intelligent invertebrates, capable of learning, problem-solving, even possibly dreaming based on the color changes they display while sleeping. They can squeeze through any opening larger than their hard beak, their boneless bodies infinitely flexible, able to pour themselves through cracks and holes like living liquid. Their skin contains millions of specialized cells, called chromatophores, that change color instantly, allowing octopuses to blend with backgrounds or flash patterns for communication. They also change texture, producing bumps and ridges that mimic coral or rock. This ability to disappear through camouflage is so effective that you can look directly at an octopus on a reef and not see it, your eyes passing over a living creature that your brain interprets as background. Not all cephalopods use the same strategies. Cuttlefish, relatives of octopuses, display even more complex color patterns, flashing hypnotic moving waves across their skin, possibly to mesmerize prey or communicate with mates. Squid are more social than octopuses, sometimes hunting in groups, coordinating their movements, displaying colors that might indicate group cohesion or hunting strategy. Nautiluses, ancient cephalopods, whose lineage dates back hundreds of millions of years, still patrol reef slopes in some parts of the coral triangle, living fossils with their beautiful spiral shells and simple eyes and tentacles. Each cephalopod group represents a different solution to the challenge of being a soft-bodied predator, different strategies for hunting and hiding in the complex reef environment. Beyond this, there's another remarkable feature of how light behaves underwater and how this shapes reef life. Water absorbs different wavelengths of light at different rates, red and orange disappearing within the first few meters, yellows and greens penetrating further, blues and violets reaching deepest. This means that a redfish at depth appears gray or black because no red light exists to reflect off its scales. Some fish may display colors primarily for communication at shallow depths, where those colors are visible, but use different signals in deeper water. Many corals and other reef organisms fluoresce, absorbing blue light and re-emitting it at longer wavelengths, creating colors that glow in the blue-dominated light of deeper water. This fluorescence may serve functions beyond what we understand, possibly protecting from excessive light, possibly aiding photosynthesis, possibly communicating information we cannot perceive. While light shapes the visible reef, many creatures operate primarily through other senses that matter more in murky water or darkness. Many fish have lateral lines running along their sides, organs that detect water pressure and movement, allowing them to sense approaching predators or prey even in complete darkness. Sharks possess this sense, along with electroreception, the ability to detect the tiny electrical fields produced by living organisms, sensing heartbeats and muscle contractions through water. Some fish produce electrical fields themselves, using them for navigation and communication in ways we're only beginning to understand. These non-visual senses open dimensions of reef experience entirely foreign to humans, ways of perceiving the world that we can describe but never truly experience, forever locked in our visually dominated consciousness. This leads to something even more remarkable about the microscopic world that underlies all reef life. Plankton drifts through reef waters in concentrations that vary with currents and time of day. Microscopic plants and animals forming the base of many food chains. Phytoplankton photosynthesize like terrestrial plants, producing oxygen and organic matter, tiny cells drifting where currents take them. Zooplankton are small animals, some the larvae of reef creatures, others spending their entire lives in the plankton, feeding on phytoplankton and being eaten by filter feeders and small fish. At night, zooplankton rise from deeper water, where they spend daylight hours, a daily vertical migration involving billions of organisms, perhaps the largest movement of biomass on Earth. This invisible world of plankton connects open ocean to reef, carries larvae between populations, feeds countless reef organisms, yet remains mostly invisible to casual observers who see only the larger, more obvious creatures. Not all plankton are independent organisms. Many are the larvae of reef species, spending days or weeks drifting before settling. Coral larvae, fish larvae, crab larvae, starfish larvae. The plankton contains the next generation of countless species, vulnerable and dispersing, spreading genes between populations that might be separated by hundreds of kilometers of open ocean. This larval dispersal connects reefs throughout the coral triangle, making them not isolated ecosystems but nodes in a vast network. Larvae spawned in Indonesia might settle in the Philippines, genes flowing between populations, preventing the isolation that leads to local adaptation and eventually speciation. This connectivity makes the entire coral triangle function as a single mega ecosystem, the largest interconnected tropical marine region on Earth. Beyond this, there's another dimension to how currents shape reef ecology and determine which species thrive where. Strong currents bring nutrients and plankton, feeding filter feeders and attracting fish that eat plankton. Gentle currents allow corals to extend polyps without damage, facilitating feeding but reducing nutrient delivery. Different parts of a reef experience different current regimes. sheltered lagoons with barely moving water, reef crests hammered by waves, and current channels where water rushes through with tidal changes. Each flow regime selects for different organisms, creating zonation patterns where species sort themselves according to current tolerance. Swimming along a reef, you notice these zones, even if you don't consciously register them. Areas where one coral type dominates, giving way to areas where different species prevail, the distribution pattern reflecting the invisible architecture of water movement. This leads them into the fascinating world of reef sharks. Creatures often misunderstood yet essential to reef health. Blacktip reef sharks patrol shallow lagoons, their dorsal fins sometimes breaking the surface, following scent trails to injured fish or investigating disturbances. Whitetip reef sharks rest in caves during the day, piled atop one another in social groups, emerging at night to hunt. Gray reef sharks cruise the reef edges where reef meets open ocean. Medium-sized predators that shape prey populations through selective predation. None of these sharks are particularly large or dangerous to humans except in unusual circumstances, yet their presence indicates a healthy reef, their role as apex predators, keeping prey populations in check and removing sick or injured individuals. Reefs without sharks often show signs of ecosystem imbalance, prey populations exploding, cascading effects flowing down through the food web. While sharks fill the apex predator role, groupers also function as important predators on many reefs. Giant groupers can grow to enormous sizes. Fish as long as a human is tall and weighing several hundred pounds, hiding in caves and under ledges, ambush predators that explode from hiding to engulf prey too slow to escape. Smaller groupers patrol territories, defending them against other groupers while hunting fish and crustaceans. Groupers can change color to match backgrounds or to signal mood, their skin patterns shifting subtly as they move across reef terrain. Some groupers show remarkable intelligence, learning to cooperate with other species in hunting, following giant moray eels and catching fish that flee the eel, or signaling to octopuses about prey hiding in crevices. These cooperative hunting relationships suggest cognitive complexity, the ability to form partnerships with different species for mutual benefit. Not all predatory relationships on the reef are violent or obvious. Many predators use stealth and patience rather than speed and power. Frogfish sit motionless, their bodies shaped and colored to resemble sponges or coral, completely invisible until they strike. Their mouths open faster than almost any other vertebrate, sucking in prey with a sudden expansion that creates a vacuum. The unfortunate fish pulled in before it can react. Scorpionfish also rely on camouflage, looking like chunks of coral-encrusted rock until they move. Peacock mantis shrimp have spring-loaded appendages that strike with such speed and force they can shatter aquarium glass, using these weapons to smash open snail shells or stun fish. These predators demonstrate that success in hunting doesn't require being large or fast, only being effective, finding a strategy that works and perfecting it through evolution. Beyond this, there's another remarkable aspect of how many reef creatures undergo dramatic transformations during their lives. Many fish begin life as nearly transparent larvae, drifting in plankton, then metamorphose when they settle onto reefs, developing colors and shapes completely different from their larval forms. Some fish change sex as they grow, starting as females and transforming to males when they reach sufficient size. Clownfish live in harems where the largest fish is female, the next largest male, and the rest immature. But if the female dies, the dominant male transforms into a female, and the next fish in the hierarchy becomes the breeding male. This sequential hermaphroditism allows small populations to maintain breeding capability, even with limited individuals. Flexibility in reproduction that serves fish living in isolated anemones well. This leads to questions about how fish navigate and find their way on the reef and between reefs. Some fish use visual landmarks, memorizing the reef's three-dimensional structure. Others rely on magnetic sense, detecting Earth's magnetic field and using it for orientation. Some smell their way home, recognizing the chemical signature of their home reef, Larvae settling from plankton appear to use sound to locate reefs, swimming toward the crackling, grinding reef soundscape from kilometers away in open ocean. Once they settle, young fish rapidly learn their territory, building mental maps through exploration, their spatial memory allowing them to navigate their habitat confidently, even in darkness or turbid water. How exactly they integrate these various senses into coherent navigation strategies remains partially mysterious. Different species probably weighting different cues differently. Not all navigation is spatial. Temporal navigation matters too, knowing when to be where. Fish learn when and where cleaning stations operate, arriving at predictable times. Predators learn when prey species are most vulnerable, timing attacks for maximum success. Many species spawn at specific lunar phases. Their internal clocks synchronize to moon cycles, ensuring that eggs and sperm release simultaneously. This temporal coordination requires internal timekeeping mechanisms, biological clocks that track days and lunar months, translating astronomical cycles into behavioral patterns. The precision of this timing suggests that natural selection heavily favors fish that get the timing right. That showing up at the wrong time carries significant costs in missed opportunities for feeding or reproduction. Beyond this, there's another layer of complexity in the social lives of reef fish, which vary from completely solitary to highly social. Some fish live alone, tolerating others only during brief spawning interactions, defending territories aggressively against all intruders. Others form loose aggregations with no obvious social structure, simply tolerating others of their species nearby. Still others form structured social groups, with dominance hierarchies, recognized individuals, and coordinated behaviors. Anthias live in harems where a dominant male guards multiple females, his bright colors advertising his status, fighting off rival males and herding females that stray too far. If the dominant male dies, the highest-ranking female transforms into a male and assumes the dominant position. The social structure maintained through this remarkable transformation. While some fish maintain rigid social structures, others show remarkable flexibility and individual recognition. Some groupers recognize individual cleaner fish and prefer certain cleaners over others, suggesting they remember past interactions and make choices based on quality of service received. Damselfish recognize their neighbors and respond less aggressively to familiar neighbors than to strangers. The deer-enemy effect that reduces conflict between established territory holders. Some reef fish show signs of personality differences, individuals within a species varying in boldness, aggression, and exploration tendency. These individual differences suggest that fish are not simply stimulus response machines but possess something approaching individuality, variations in temperament that make each fish slightly different from its neighbors. This leads them into the fascinating world of anemone fish, commonly called clownfish, and their intimate relationship with sea anemones. Anemones are animals, related to corals, with stinging tentacles that can paralyze and kill fish. Yet clownfish live among these tentacles without harm. The fish are protected by a mucus layer that prevents the anemone from recognizing them as prey, though how exactly this works remains debated. Some suggest the fish steal the anemone's own mucus, others that the mucus chemically mimics the anemone's tissue. The relationship benefits both partners. The fish gains protection from predators that avoid the stinging tentacles, while the fish defends the anemone from butterfly fish that would otherwise eat it, and may also feed the anemone by depositing nutrients in the form of waste products. Not all anemone fish species use the same anemone species, and different anemone species offer different advantages and disadvantages. Some anemones host single clownfish pairs, others host larger groups. The fish's color patterns often match their preferred anemone species, orange and white fish living in certain anemones, darker fish in others, suggesting long coevolution between fish and anemone. Young clownfish imprint on the smell of their host anemone, learning to recognize their home and return to it if displaced. This imprinting means that clownfish learn through early experience which anemone species is home, knowledge passed not through genes, but through individual experience. Another example of how learning supplements genetic programming in reef fish. Beyond this, there's another remarkable feature of the coral triangle in the presence of manta rays. Enormous filter feeders that seem to fly through water rather than swim. Mantas have the largest brain-to-body ratio of any fish, possibly indicating significant intelligence. Though what they do with those large brains remains mysterious. They feed by funneling plankton-rich water through their mouths, filtering out small organisms with specialized structures called gill rakers. Mantas often visit cleaning stations, where smaller fish remove parasites, the huge rays hovering patiently while cleaners work. Some mantas return to the same cleaning stations repeatedly over years, suggesting site fidelity and possibly individual recognition of good cleaning stations. Swimming with manta rays is to witness grace and gentleness, combined with enormous size, creatures that could intimidate, but instead evoke wonder. While mantas filter plankton from the water column, whale sharks do the same, but on an even larger scale. Whale sharks, the largest fish in the ocean, pass through the coral triangle seasonally, following plankton blooms and areas where small fish spawn, creating temporary aggregations of this normally rare species. They swim slowly, mouths open, filtering massive volumes of water, their spotted patterns unique to each individual, allowing researchers to identify and track specific sharks over years. Despite their size, whale sharks are gentle and often allow divers to swim alongside them, close enough to touch, though this is discouraged to avoid disturbing the animals. Seeing a whale shark appears on many divers' lists of ultimate experiences, encounters with these giants producing awe and a sense of connection to the ocean's largest creatures. This leads to the important role of sea turtles in the coral triangle ecosystem. 6 of the world's 7 sea turtle species use these waters, coming to beaches to nest, feeding in seagrass meadows and on reefs, migrating between distant locations with remarkable navigational precision. Green turtles graze on seagrasses and algae, their grazing maintaining seagrass health, much like terrestrial herbivores maintain grasslands. Hawksbill turtles feed primarily on sponges, using their sharp beaks to bite off chunks, specializing in a food source most other creatures cannot eat because of sponge toxins. Leatherback turtles, the largest turtles, feed primarily on jellyfish, ranging widely through open ocean. Though they nest on coral triangle beaches and young leatherbacks likely feed in these productive waters, not all turtle species face the same conservation challenges, though all are threatened to varying degrees. Turtles face threats from egg collection, though this is increasingly regulated in most countries. They drown in fishing nets, become entangled in plastic debris, ingest plastic that blocks their digestive systems. Climate change affects turtles through multiple pathways. Rising temperatures produce more female hatchlings, because turtle sex is determined by incubation temperature. Rising seas erode nesting beaches. Changing currents may affect hatchling dispersal and feeding. Despite these challenges, turtle populations in some areas show encouraging signs of recovery where protection is enforced, demonstrating that conservation efforts can succeed when given sufficient commitment and resources. Beyond this, there's another dimension to understanding coral bleaching and what it means for the reef ecosystem. Bleaching occurs when corals become stressed, most commonly by water temperatures even a degree or two above normal, causing them to expel their zooxanthellae symbionts. The coral doesn't die immediately upon bleaching but is weakened, forced to survive without the food its algal partners provided. If temperatures drop quickly, the coral can recover, regaining zooxanthellae and returning to health. If stress persists, the coral starves, its tissue dying, leaving only the white skeleton behind. Bleaching events have increased in frequency and severity in recent decades, raising concerns about coral reef persistence in a warming ocean. Some corals and some locations appear more resistant to bleaching, and understanding why offers hope for selecting resilient corals for restoration efforts. This leads them into the question of coral disease, another threat to reef health. Corals can contract bacterial and fungal infections that spread across their tissues, killing polyps, leaving bare skeleton. Some diseases spread from coral to coral through direct contact, or through the water, creating epidemics that can devastate reef sections. Disease resistance varies between coral species and between individuals within species, suggesting genetic components to resilience. Healthy reefs with good water quality generally show less disease than degraded reefs, implying that overall reef health influences disease resistance. Understanding coral disease mechanisms remains a research frontier, with much still unknown about pathogen identity, transmission pathways, environmental cofactors, and potential treatments or prevention strategies. While disease attacks corals, predation also shapes coral populations. Crown of thorns, starfish, feed on coral polyps, climbing onto colonies and everting their stomachs onto the coral surface, digesting tissue externally, then absorbing the liquefied nutrients. A single starfish can consume several square meters of living coral per year, and during outbreak periods, densities can reach dozens of starfish per square meter, devastating large reef areas. Why outbreaks occur remains debated, with hypotheses involving overfishing of starfish predators, nutrient pollution, increasing larval survival, or natural population cycles. Controlling outbreaks involves manually removing starfish, a labor-intensive process that can succeed in protecting priority areas but is impractical across entire reef systems. Not all coral predators cause such visible damage. Some parrotfish and butterflyfish bite small pieces from coral, feeding on polyps or the algae growing on coral surfaces. These predators remove small amounts of tissue that healthy corals can regenerate, creating a balance between predation and coral growth. The corallivores maintain diversity by preventing any single coral species from dominating, creating space for other species by damaging fast-growing competitors. This predation, at moderate levels, actually increases diversity by preventing competitive exclusion, though at high levels, it can damage corals faster than they can recover. The balance between coral growth and coral loss from all causes determines whether reefs expand, remain stable, or decline over time. Beyond this, there's another remarkable adaptation in how many reef creatures have evolved: bioluminescence, the ability to produce light through chemical reactions. Some fish have light-producing bacteria living in specialized organs, creating glowing lures to attract prey or signals to communicate with mates. Other organisms produce their own light through specialized cells. Some squid can control complex patterns of bioluminescent spots across their bodies, flashing signals to potential mates, or creating confusing patterns to escape predators. The functions of bioluminescence are diverse: attracting prey, finding mates, communicating with group members, startling predators, camouflaging silhouettes when viewed from below by matching downwelling light. In deeper reef areas where sunlight barely penetrates, bioluminescence becomes the primary light source, creating an entirely different visual environment than the sunlit shallows. This leads to questions about how deep reefs differ from shallow reefs, and how the coral triangle contains both. Shallow reefs, in the first 20 meters of water, receive abundant sunlight and typically show the highest coral diversity and growth rates. Deeper reefs, from 20 to 40 meters, receive less light but still support coral growth, often with different species compositions than shallow areas. Mesophotic reefs, from about 30 to 150 meters deep, represent a relatively recently studied ecosystem, deep enough that only blue light penetrates, yet still supporting diverse communities, including corals, sponges, and fish. These deep reefs may serve as refuges from surface disturbances like bleaching events or storms, potentially reseeding shallow reefs after damage. The coral triangle contains extensive mesophotic habitats that remain poorly explored, likely harboring species yet to be described by science. Not all reef habitats are on slopes or walls. The coral triangle also contains extensive shallow lagoons, protected areas behind reef crests, where water is calm and often turbid from resuspended sediment. These lagoons support different communities than exposed reefs, with more seagrass and soft coral, fewer wave-resistant hard corals. Patch reefs dot some lagoons, coral formations rising from sandy bottoms like underwater islands. Each patch a miniature ecosystem surrounded by sand and grass. Channels cut through reefs, funneling water with tidal changes, creating high-current environments that support filter feeders and attract pelagic fish. This habitat diversity creates ecological diversity, each habitat type supporting somewhat different communities, the mosaic of habitats increasing overall regional biodiversity beyond what any single habitat type could support alone. Beyond this, there's another fascinating dimension to the invertebrate life that covers reef surfaces. Tunicates, also called sea squirts, are actually more closely related to vertebrates than to most other invertebrates, sharing a notochord during larval development. Adult tunicates are sessile filter feeders, pumping water through their bodies, extracting particles, looking like nothing more than fleshy bumps on reef surfaces. Some tunicates are solitary, others colonial, with many individuals sharing tissue and coordinating their activity. Tunicates can be brightly colored oranges, reds, purples, their colors possibly deterring predators or resulting from compounds that protect them from light or fouling. They compete with corals for space on the reef, and in some locations appear to be winning, expanding while corals decline, raising questions about what determines the balance between these different space competitors. While tunicates filter water, bryozoans do the same but in a completely different body form. Bryozoans are colonial animals, where each individual, called a zooid, is microscopic, but colonies can cover large areas, creating encrusting mats or branching structures. Each zooid is essentially a tiny filter feeder with a crown of tentacles that creates currents drawing water toward its mouth. Thousands of zooids working together can filter significant volumes of water, removing bacteria and microscopic particles. Bryozoans look like moss or coral but are neither, representatives of a less familiar animal phylum that nonetheless plays important roles in reef ecosystems. Most people swim past bryozoans without noticing them, their small size and encrusting growth form making them blend into the reef background despite their abundance. This leads them into the world of reef crustaceans, an enormously diverse group that fills countless ecological roles. Mantis shrimp live in burrows in the reef, emerging to hunt or defend their territories with their powerful striking appendages. Cleaner shrimp work at cleaning stations alongside cleaner fish, dancing to attract clients, picking parasites and dead tissue with surprising delicacy from fish many times their size. Hermit crabs scuttle across reef surfaces carrying their borrowed shells, changing shells as they grow, competing for appropriately sized housing. Decorator crabs attach pieces of sponge and algae to their shells, creating living camouflage that makes them nearly invisible. Each crustacean species represents a different solution to surviving in the reef environment. Different body plans, different strategies, different niches carved from the available resources and opportunities. Not all crustaceans are small. Lobsters can grow quite large, hiding in caves during the day, emerging at night to hunt. Their powerful claws can crack open snail shells and crush sea urchins, giving them access to food sources protected against most predators. Lobsters lack the large, crushing claws of their cold water relatives, but their defenses include sharp spines covering their bodies and the ability to snap their tails powerfully, shooting backward to escape danger. Some lobsters make sounds by rubbing body parts together, possibly to defend territories or communicate with other lobsters. The nocturnal habits of many crustaceans mean that night dives reveal a completely different fauna than day dives on the same reef. A reminder that our perception of reef communities depends strongly on when we observe. Beyond this, there's another remarkable feature in how many reef organisms employ chemical defenses beyond simple toxins. Soft corals produce compounds that deter predators and prevent other organisms from settling on their surfaces. Nudibranchs, shellless mollusks that crawl across reefs, often sequester toxins from the sponges or corals they eat, storing these poisons in their own tissues to protect themselves. Their bright colors advertise their toxicity, warning potential predators to leave them alone. This strategy, called aposematism, works because predators learn to avoid brightly colored, distasteful prey. The diversity of nudibranch color patterns rivals tropical butterflies, with some species showing electric blues and purples, others stark black and white patterns, still others subtle pastels, each color combination warning that eating this particular creature would be unpleasant or dangerous. While nudibranchs crawl across surfaces, flatworms do the same but with a different body plan. Marine flatworms can be spectacularly colorful, their thin bodies allowing them to undulate across reef surfaces like living ripples. Some flatworms can regenerate from small pieces, each fragment potentially growing into a complete worm, an ability that facilitates asexual reproduction and recovery from predation. Flatworms are aquelomates, lacking a body cavity, keeping them flat and limiting their size. Despite these constraints, they successfully occupy reef habitats, showing that even simple body plans can thrive in complex ecosystems if they find an unexploited niche. Their beauty often surprises divers who notice them, unexpected gems hiding among more obvious creatures. This leads to questions about how competition for space shapes reef communities. Reef surfaces are essentially two-dimensional, and organisms compete intensely for attachment sites. Fast-growing species can outcompete slower species by overgrowing them, but fast growth often comes with trade-offs in durability or defensive capabilities. Slow-growing species may persist through superior defenses, toxins that prevent overgrowth, aggressive responses that damage competitors, or simply durability that allows them to outlast faster but more fragile competitors. The result is a complex mosaic, where different species dominate different areas depending on local conditions of light, current, disturbance, frequency, and predation pressure. Walking across this mosaic, each meter of reef surface tells a story of past competitions won and lost, territories gained and surrendered, the history written in the distribution of species. Not all space competition involves direct aggression. Some organisms simply grow faster than others, claiming space through rapid expansion rather than active warfare. Algae can overgrow corals if herbivore populations decline, the rapid growing algae shading and eventually smothering slower growing coral. This shift, from coral-dominated to algae-dominated reefs, represents a phase shift, a fundamental change in ecosystem state that can be difficult to reverse, even if conditions improve. Maintaining herbivore populations, parrotfish, surgeonfish, sea urchins, helps prevent this shift by keeping algae cropped short, allowing corals to maintain their dominance. The balance between coral and algae, mediated by herbivores, represents one of the most important dynamics determining reef health and resilience. Beyond this, there's another dimension to understanding how storms affect reef communities. Cyclones and typhoons generate waves powerful enough to break coral, rearrange reef structure, and create rubble fields where solid reef once stood. Yet reefs have evolved with storms, and many species show adaptations that help them survive these periodic disturbances. Branching corals break easily but also grow quickly and can regenerate from fragments, a strategy that accepts high mortality during storms but recovers rapidly afterward. Massive boulder corals rarely break but grow slowly, a different strategy that emphasizes persistence through storms rather than rapid recovery. Storm damage creates space for new coral settlement and can increase diversity by preventing any single species from dominating. The disturbance becomes part of the natural rhythm, shaping community structure through periodic reorganization. This leads them into the fascinating world of how fish larvae navigate from open ocean back to reefs. Larvae spawned on reefs drift with currents for days or weeks, dispersing far from their natal reefs, then must find suitable habitat for settlement. Recent research shows that larvae are not passive drifters. but active swimmers capable of directed movement, especially near the end of the larval period. They swim toward reef sounds, the crackling of shrimp, the grinding of parrotfish, the grunts and croaks of fish, using these acoustic cues to locate reefs from considerable distances. They also respond to chemical cues, detecting the smell of reef organisms and swimming toward these signals. Some larvae can detect reef-associated light patterns, the way sunlight flickers through shallow water. Through this combination of senses, larvae find reefs and settle in appropriate habitats, completing the cycle that connects one generation to the next. While larvae search for reefs, adult fish maintain the territories they've claimed, defending them through displays and, when necessary, through combat. Most conflicts are resolved through ritualized displays, fish facing each other, spreading fins to appear larger, changing colors to signal aggression or dominance. The fish assess each other, comparing size and condition, usually with the smaller or weaker fish backing down without physical contact. When fights do occur, they typically involve chasing, ramming, and biting, but serious injuries are relatively uncommon. Evolution favors restraint in these conflicts because even winners can be injured badly enough to compromise survival or attract larger predators to the commotion. The ritualized nature of most conflicts represents a solution that allows individuals to compete for resources while minimizing the costs of competition. Not all territorial species defend the same resources. Some fish defend feeding territories, areas where they maintain algae gardens or access to food. Others defend breeding territories, spaces suitable for spawning or nest building. Still others defend shelter sites, caves, or crevices that provide safety from predators. The size and shape of territories vary with what's being defended and how valuable and defensible the resource is. Small territories clustered together create neighborhoods where individuals recognize their neighbors and maintain relatively stable boundaries through repeated interactions. Larger territories, defended by bigger fish, overlap less and may change boundaries less frequently. This territoriality creates spatial structure in reef fish communities, each species parceling up available space according to their needs and competitive abilities. Beyond this, there's another remarkable aspect of how some fish build and maintain structures on the reef. Jawfish excavate burrows in sandy areas adjacent to reefs, carrying mouthfuls of sand away from the burrow entrance, creating conical pits where they hover, darting into their burrows when threatened. Male jawfish hold eggs in their mouths until hatching, protecting their offspring through weeks of development without eating. Garden eels also dig burrows, colonies of eels emerging partway from the sand to feed on plankton drifting past, their bodies swaying like grass in current. Damselfish sometimes move coral rubble to create or expand territories, demonstrating basic tool use. These construction behaviors modify habitat in ways that persist beyond individual fish lifespans, each generation inheriting and modifying structures created by previous generations. This leads to questions about how fish communicate beyond the territorial displays already mentioned. Many reef fish produce sounds by grinding teeth, vibrating swim bladders, or rubbing bones together, creating grunts, croaks, chirps, and other vocalizations. These sounds can communicate aggression, courtship interest, alarm, or simply location. Some sounds occur primarily during spawning, males calling to attract females or coordinating the precise timing of gamete release. Other sounds signal territorial boundaries, allowing fish to maintain spacing without constant visual contact. The reef's soundscape, so rich with biological sounds, represents a communication network we're only beginning to understand. Conversations happening all around, but in frequencies and patterns our ears barely register, or our brains don't interpret as language. While fish vocalize, many also use visual signals beyond simple body position. Color changes can happen instantly in some species, patterns shifting to signal aggression, submission, courtship, or alarm. Some fish flash specific color patterns only during spawning, visual signals synchronized with gamete release to ensure coordination between males and females. Others use bioluminescent flashes, particularly in deeper waters where visual communication otherwise would be limited. Body movements also communicate rapid darting signals. Alarm, slow approaches, signal non-aggression. Specific swimming patterns during courtship indicate species identity and readiness to spawn. This multimodal communication, combining sound, color, bioluminescence, and movement, creates a rich information environment where reef fish constantly broadcast and receive signals about identity, intent, and emotional state. Not all communication is intentional. Many signals are inadvertent. Prey species revealing their location through movement or sound, allowing predators to locate them. The challenge for prey is to communicate with their own species while remaining undetectable to predators. A problem with no perfect solution. Some prey species communicate using high-frequency sounds that their predators cannot hear, exploiting sensory differences between species. Others use chemical signals that diffuse slowly, reaching nearby group members, but not traveling far enough to attract distant predators. The evolutionary arms race between prey trying to communicate covertly and predators trying to intercept those communications has shaped signaling strategies in complex ways, each species finding its own balance between the need to communicate and the need to remain hidden. Beyond this, there's another fascinating dimension to how cleaning symbioses structure reef communities. Cleaning stations become focal points where fish gather, creating temporary aggregations of species that otherwise don't associate. Large predators that would normally hunt smaller fish become docile at cleaning stations, submitting to cleaning by fish small enough to be a single bite. This transformation of predators into clients requires trust, or at least behavioral inhibition, systems that suppress predatory behavior in specific contexts. Cleaner fish rarely get eaten, suggesting that clients recognize and value the service, though occasional cleaners are consumed when they venture too far into a client's mouth, or when the client is particularly hungry. The cleaning relationship has evolved multiple times independently in different fish families, suggesting that it provides significant benefits to both partners. This leads them into the world of mimicry on coral reefs, where some species gain advantages by resembling other species. Some harmless fish mimic toxic species, gaining protection through their resemblance to dangerous models. The mimic octopus can change shape and color to impersonate various toxic creatures: flatfish, lionfish, sea snakes, selecting which animal to imitate based on what predator threatens it. Some aggressive mimics resemble harmless species, allowing them to approach prey without triggering alarm responses. Blennies that mimic cleaner wrasses approach larger fish as if to clean them, then bite chunks from their fins instead, gaining a meal through deception. These mimicry relationships require that models be common enough and distinctive enough that predators learn to avoid them, creating frequency-dependent selection, where mimics benefit only if they remain relatively rare compared to models. While some species use visual mimicry, others employ chemical mimicry. Some crabs cover themselves with pieces of stinging hydroids or toxic sponges, gaining protection through their resemblance to or association with defended organisms. Certain shrimp associate with specific corals, their bodies matching the coral's polyps so precisely that they become nearly invisible. Some fish change color to match background colors and patterns so precisely that only movement reveals their presence. This crypsis, the art of becoming invisible, represents a different strategy than mimicry, but serves similar functions, avoiding detection by predators or prey. The reef's visual complexity, with its countless textures and colors, provides endless opportunities for camouflage, and many species exploit these opportunities through body shapes and color patterns that render them effectively invisible against appropriate backgrounds. Not all camouflage is passive. Some species can change color and pattern actively, adjusting their appearance to match changing backgrounds or to signal different messages in different contexts. Cuttlefish demonstrate the most spectacular active camouflage, flashing complex moving patterns across their skin, creating displays that mesmerize prey or signal to conspecifics. Octopuses change not only color but texture, their skin forming bumps and ridges that mimic coral, rock, or algae. These transformations happen in seconds, controlled by nervous systems sophisticated enough to analyze visual scenes and recreate key features in the animal's own skin. The cognitive capacity required for such feat suggests intelligence, though intelligence of a kind very different from vertebrate intelligence, evolution. Discovering another pathway to complex information, processing, and behavioral flexibility. Beyond this, there's another remarkable feature of coral reef resilience and recovery. After disturbances, storms, bleaching events, crown of thorns, outbreaks, reefs can recover if conditions allow. Fast-growing coral species often dominate early recovery, rapidly colonizing available space. Over time, slower-growing species gradually increase in abundance, eventually returning the community toward its pre-disturbance composition, though this process can take decades. Recovery requires new coral settlement from larvae, either from survivors within the damaged area or from distant source populations, emphasizing the importance of connectivity between reefs. Recovery also requires control of factors that might prevent recovery. Excessive algae growth, continued high temperatures, poor water quality, ongoing physical disturbance. Reefs in marine protected areas often recover faster than unprotected reefs, suggesting that reducing local stressors improves resilience even when regional stressors like climate change cannot be controlled locally. This leads to questions about what makes some reefs more resilient than others. Diversity itself contributes to resilience reefs, with many species have more functional redundancy, meaning that if one species declines, others can fill similar ecological roles. Strong herbivore populations prevent algae from overgrowing corals during recovery periods. Good water quality supports coral health and settlement. Appropriate management, reducing fishing pressure, pollution, and physical damage, provides the breathing room reefs need to cope with climate change impacts. Some reefs in naturally variable environments show greater thermal tolerance, their corals adapted to occasional temperature spikes, suggesting these locations might serve as refugia and sources for more heat-tolerant corals. Understanding and protecting these resilient reefs represents an important conservation strategy, preserving the populations most likely to persist through coming changes. While scientists study resilience, local communities often implement traditional management practices that unknowingly support reef health. Many Pacific Island cultures have traditional systems of marine tenure and periodic closures, temporarily banning fishing in certain areas to allow populations to recover. These traditional practices, developed through generations of observation and experience, often align remarkably well with modern conservation science, though the frameworks and justifications differ. Increasingly, conservation programs partner with local communities, combining traditional knowledge with scientific understanding, recognizing that local people have both the greatest stake in reef health and often the most detailed knowledge of local reef dynamics. This partnership approach respects cultural autonomy while bringing resources and technical support, creating conservation outcomes more effective and equitable than top-down management imposed by distant authorities. Not all human impacts on reefs are negative. Well-managed tourism can generate economic value that supports conservation, creating incentives to maintain reef health. Coral restoration programs successfully grow and transplant corals in some locations, accelerating recovery of damaged areas. Marine protected areas, when enforced, demonstrably increase fish populations and coral cover. Research increases understanding of reef ecology, providing knowledge needed for effective management. Education creates constituencies that value reefs and support their protection. While reefs face serious threats, the combination of scientific research, traditional knowledge, local stewardship, and global awareness creates hope that at least some reefs can persist through the changes ahead. Refugia, of diversity in a changing ocean. Beyond this, there's another dimension to the spiritual and cultural significance of reefs for many human communities. For island peoples throughout the Coral Triangle, reefs are not just resources but places of deep cultural meaning, featured in stories, ceremonies, and traditional knowledge systems. Reefs provide food security, coastal protection, cultural identity, and economic opportunity. Their degradation represents not just ecological loss, but cultural loss, the erosion of traditional ways of life built around reef and ocean. Conservation that ignores these cultural dimensions risks failing because it doesn't address what reefs mean to the people who live with them daily. Successful conservation recognizes that reefs are both ecological and cultural phenomena, that protecting reefs means supporting the communities that depend on and steward them. This leads them into the question of what the future holds for Coral Triangle reefs. Climate projections suggest continued warming, more frequent bleaching events, ocean acidification that makes it harder for corals to build skeletons, changing currents that might alter larval connectivity. Yet reefs have persisted through past environmental changes, and some reefs and some coral species show surprising resilience. Corals can adapt through natural selection, if selection pressure is strong, but not immediately lethal. If populations remain large enough to contain genetic diversity, if connectivity allows adapted genes to spread, human interventions, reducing local stresses, protecting resilient reefs, restoring damaged areas, possibly eventually transplanting heat-tolerant corals or assisting coral evolution, might help some reefs persist. The future is uncertain, neither hopeless nor assured, but contingent on actions taken and choices made by human societies far beyond the Coral Triangle itself. While the future remains uncertain, the present still holds wonder beyond measure. Even degraded reefs support more life than most terrestrial habitats. Even reefs, stressed by bleaching and storms, continue to function, providing food and shelter for countless organisms. The resilience of reef organisms, their capacity to persist through difficulty, to recover from damage, to adapt to change within the limits of their biology, inspires something between hope and humility. These communities of life, assembled over evolutionary time, refined through countless trials, represent solutions to the challenge of existence that deserve respect and protection, not just for their utility to humans, but for their own intrinsic worth, their simple fact of being, their membership in the community of life on Earth. Not all questions about reefs have answers. Why does one location support high diversity while nearby similar habitats support less? How exactly do fish perceive the reef? What does it look like, sound like, smell like through their senses? What happens in the microscopic scale, in the interactions between bacteria and coral cells, in the chemical signals exchanged between organisms too small to see? How will individual reef patches respond to the specific combination of stresses they face? Science progresses through patient observation and experimentation, each study answering some questions while revealing new ones. Knowledge advancing but never complete, mystery persisting alongside understanding. The reef keeps some secrets, reveals others slowly, remains ultimately beyond complete human comprehension because its complexity exceeds our capacity to fully grasp. Beyond this, there's another truth worth contemplating as sleep approaches. Every organism on the reef, from the smallest plankton to the largest shark, is trying to survive, to persist through another day, to pass genes to the next generation. None of them knows the reef is threatened. None contemplates climate change or conservation. None carries the burden of awareness that humans bear. They simply live, responding to conditions as they encounter them, doing what evolution prepared them to do, being what they are, with completeness impossible for self-aware creatures. In their unconscious persistence, their simple existence without questioning or anxiety, there is something we might call peace, though they would not call it anything, having no words, only experience, only the eternal present of living without past or future. This leads to one final image to carry into sleep. Somewhere in warm tropical waters, as you lie comfortable and safe, A coral reef breathes through the night. Polyps extend their tentacles into the current, filtering food from passing water. Nocturnal fish emerge from daytime shelters to hunt. Somewhere a parrotfish sleeps wrapped in a mucus cocoon that masks its scent from night predators. A turtle rests wedged under a coral ledge, metabolizing slowly through the night. Sharks patrol the reef edge, following scent trails through darkness. Tiny larvae drift in the plankton, some settling tonight to begin their reef lives. The reef continues its ancient rhythms, indifferent to human concerns, simply being what it has always been, what it evolved to be over millions of years. While you drift towards sleep, the reef sustains its countless inhabitants through partnerships and competitions, through predation and cooperation, through the constant cycling of energy and nutrients that maintains the community. No organism on the reef knows the whole reef. Each knows only its small territory, its particular niche, its specific relationships with the few species it interacts with regularly. The reef as a whole emerges from countless small interactions, none planned, none coordinated by any central authority, simply happening because evolution shaped each species to fit into the community in ways that allow persistence. The complexity arises from simplicity, the community from individuals, the ecosystem from organisms simply living their lives. Not all of the reef's story is written. What happens next depends partly on forces beyond the reef. Global climate patterns, human choices made far away, economic and political decisions that affect ocean health. But it also depends on the reef itself, on the resilience built into its communities through evolutionary time, on the capacity of organisms to adapt and persist, on the simple durability of life that has survived every previous crisis over billions of years. The reef is not fragile in the way that word usually implies. It is resilient, tough, adapted to disturbance. But resilience has limits, and current changes test those limits in ways evolution did not prepare these communities to handle. What emerges from this test remains to be seen. Beyond all facts and information, beyond conservation concerns and scientific questions, there remains something irreducible about the reef experience. To swim over a coral garden in clear water, surrounded by color and movement and life in overwhelming abundance, creates a sense of connection to something larger than individual human existence. The reef reminds us that we are one species among millions, that life takes countless forms, that the world contains beauty and complexity beyond what we typically encounter in daily life. Whether experienced directly through diving or indirectly through images and descriptions, the reef offers perspective, a reminder that humans are part of nature rather than separate from it, that our fate connects to the fate of coral and fish, and all the uncountable organisms sharing this planet. And now the reef fades behind your thoughts. We've drifted through 100 quiet truths about the coral triangle, from the zooxanthellae that give corals life to the whale sharks that glide through these waters, from the tiniest gobies to the vast networks connecting reefs across thousands of kilometers. You are connected to this world. The oxygen in your lungs was produced partly by reef organisms, photosynthesizing in tropical waters, contributing to the atmosphere that sustains all terrestrial life. The calcium in your bones was cycled through ancient oceans where corals grew and dissolved through countless generations. The very elements that compose your body were forged in stars, just as the elements composing reef organisms came from the same cosmic origins. Tonight, as you rest, coral polyps continue filtering plankton from tropical waters. Fish swim through darkness, hunting and hiding and resting. Larvae drift on currents, seeking reefs where they will settle and grow. The ancient rhythms continue, waves breaking on reef crests, tides rising and falling, the moon pulling at the ocean just as it pulled a billion years ago. And you are safe, warm, resting in a world full of wonder, a world that contains both you and coral reefs, and 10 million other improbable expressions of life's creativity. If you're still awake, go ahead and watch the next chapter. Sleep well and dream softly. Good night.